Hi, welcome to our next video series. We're going to create a tracking system for music. So basically, it's going to consist of a page that looks a lot like this one. It'll have title, year, artist, and we'll do some drop down selection capability here. And when you hit save, it'll take you to a page called albums. And on this page, it'll have nice responsive design, so we can resize it. You'll have the ability to go back and edit any particular album, or if you want to just delete something, you can hit delete. It's going to pop up a little window there, and you can say OK. So that's the goal for the next several videos. We're going to start off by building our form, and then we'll we'll talk about saving the information into a table, and from there we're going to display it on a page like this. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm going to go into PHP and I'm going to create a new project. And I'm going to call it the musicLibrary. Okay, so in here, first thing we're going to do, first things first, we're going to create a new PHP file, and I'm going to call this album details, and it's a PHP file. In a previous video, we talked about how to create a custom template. So if you haven't done that, I'd suggest watching one of the earlier videos that captures that. But here we put a title in. So again, our title is basically these tabs up here in our web browsers. So it's going to look like that. So album details there is same as this here. And then put in some tags. Okay, so if we look at our, that'll give us, H1 tag gives us that nice big header up there, and then let's build a form that will post into a Save Albums page. So to do that, let's go into our PHP storm here. So here I'm going to say, sorry, don't need any PHP just yet. For now, we'll just need to build our form. So an important thing with when building forms, if you don't put information inside of this closing form tag, it will not be included in your post. So here we have to set the method equals, and you can see there's post and get. Again, the big difference between post and get is when you post something, you will not see this type of information up here. Okay, this is a get. Get has a little question mark, and then you can put in some other variables. So I'm going to say the method equals post, and the action equals, and we haven't created the page yet, but it's going to be called save album.php. So it'll navigate to a file called savealbum.php when we do this. So put in a label for the title. And put a little star beside it to indicate that it's required. Keep going outside of my brackets, my quotes here, and I'll say it's required, and we'll say the placeholder is title. Actually, we'll do, okay, hit save. Now if I go back, right away I can already see, so Spring 17, music music library slash sorry. So right away you can see our title. So there's the label that we put in, and then there's the field to put in our album title, and that placeholder information is already handled. So now I can type in, a new title here, right? It'll overwrite whatever that placeholder is. So let's do the same thing for the year. But for the year, we won't make it required. But we can say that the type equals number, and we can say that it has a minimum value. I'm choosing 1900 pretty arbitrarily. I guess you could research to find out when the first original recording really was. I know there's music before 1900. I'm not sure about recordings. Anyways, if we hit refresh now, you can see our next field set's been added. And if we do another one for the artist, actually let's do the artist, will make it required. So there we go. Okay. Now, as we've talked about in previous videos, obviously this doesn't look too fantastic, and we can use things like Bootstrap to really speed things along. So, do I have? Yes. So, all I did to get to here was went to my good old friend Google, into Bootstrap. And then here, if I go to download Bootstrap, I can literally just copy these links straight out of here and paste them right in my header. And I'll show you how to actually put these locally in a subsequent video. And we'll pull in the JavaScript as well. I'm going to put that at the bottom so it doesn't delay our loading. So just by adding that, if I go back here, when I hit refresh, now it already is starting to look a little bit better. It still doesn't look great. So let's add in some other elements here. So if up here I say main. Okay, so inside the body, I'll put everything inside of a container. So there's the end of our body. So now I can say class equals container. And hit refresh. And it's going to adjust things a little bit. Now you can see how title, year, and artist are all different lengths. So what happens is our columns, our inputs don't line up very nicely. But we can fix that. When we look at our labels here, we can add in some details as well. So for the field set, you can add in a class. Okay, so that makes it look a little bit better. Spaces out a little nicer. And then for each of the labels themselves, we can say class equals. And what this does is it basically, the screen's divided, I think it's into 12 small columns. So this will make the label one column wide. So hit refresh here. See how that adjusted that? So let's just copy that class and put it in every label. Save. Okay, so now these are starting to line up. And then the last thing we need is we need a way to trigger this to go to the next page, which means we need to add a button. Okay, so if I hit button, so normally what you do is you try to line this up with this column here. So what I'm going to do is here, I'm going to say class equals, and I can use this same piece here, but I'm going to add in the word offset. Okay, so now these line up. Now Bootstrap, you'll start to recognize the Bootstrap classes. Their buttons are a little bit more rounded, right? So here I can also say the class equals button. So now it looks a little more rounded. And then if I want to change the color, save. And where I got that from, you can look it up, but basically Bootstrap, there's the basic, that's what we had. So when I used button-btn-success, I got this style of button. Okay, so now our form looks quite nice. And what we're going to do is now we're going to use this information to send information to our database. And what happens is when the button is pushed, it's going to call this action, okay, which means it'll now move to the page savealbum.php. And all the information in our table will be stored in something called the post array. And the names within that array are going to be title, year, and artist. Okay. So let's go to our Save Albums page and start to create that. So we're going to say, so right now, if we run this, it's going to give us a 404. Oh, because I said it was required, I have to give it a name. Okay, so test. Some point in the future, hit save, we get this 404 page. So let's create that now. So I'm going to say new PHP file, save album. And in here, I'm going to read from that post array. Okay, so let's just echo this stuff to the screen for a second. So I'm going to say title equals, oops. So you see how as soon as whenever you hit $, everything that follows is going to be a variable name. So here, when I say $, it shows here's all the predefined variables available to you. And this first one, post, its data type is an array. And if I want to access things within that array, I refer to them by their name. So here, the name is title. So in here, I'm going to put title. And similarly, I can do the same thing for year. And artist. Okay, and if I want to check, so if we want to check our results, we could just echo them to the screen. So we'll say echo title, and this dot appends our variables here. So we can actually say title, and then we can append in a new line character here. Okay, so if we go to check this out, Okay, so we can create a new album. So there we can see the results of running our script here. So the next thing that we need to do really is we need to write this all to the database. So to do that, I'm going to go to MySQL Workbench. Now MySQL Workbench allows us to work directly on the server. You wouldn't do a lot of work typically directly on the server. A lot of stuff is going to be actually creating your PHP to write to the files and edit the files on our tables. But in this case, let me just get rid of, actually I don't need to get rid of what we have, but I've created a table called albums. And in here I have an album ID, okay, which is a unique way of identifying each album. And to ensure that it's unique, what I did is I said this is a primary key. So the primary key, it will not allow me to add another record that has the same number in it. So for example, if I try to add another album ID with a 1 in it, let me just add in here. So if I try to add in another record with a 1, I'll actually get this error. It says duplicate entry 1 for key primary. So it's basically saying you already have a primary key of 1. You can't add another record with that. Now if I made that 100, it doesn't have to be sequential. It just has to be unique. That would go in, right? So if I look at my table here, now I can see there's album. As long as it's unique, the primary key is satisfied. So album ID, I made it an integer, and then I had title length up to 50 characters. The year I made an integer, and then artist and genre you can see in here as well. So when we look at saving this information, I have title, year, and artist. So let's get rid of this. So if I were to, let's just change the name so I don't get too many duplicate records in here. If I were to run this command in, and then I'll run this select star command in, I can see it added in this new record for me. Okay, so I know that this insert works, and you're learning in your database class how to insert records into tables right now. So I'm going to copy this, and things that are important here. This is the column name, and this is the value that we put into that column. Then there's a comma, and over here there's a comma, and then I have the next column with data and the value for it. Okay, so that pattern has to be the same. So let's go over here to our saved data, and this is where we're going to have to do some, whoops. Oh, I'm already in a PHP tag, that's why it's not working. I'm like, what? Okay, so here, step 1, connect to the database. Step 2, write, or okay, so step 6 isn't a requirement, but it is how I'm going to handle this. So the reason I like to build it out like this in pseudocode is it's a lot easier to think through the process in just regular English. And if English isn't your first language, then you could always think about it in whatever your native language is. But it's about thinking through the problem. If you know what you want the program to do, chances are that you'll be able to figure out how to make it do it. But you need to know that first step, what do I want it to do? So first we're going to connect to the database. So I'm going to create a variable called con, short for connection, and I'm going to say that equals a new PDO. And here we say MySQL host equals, now I'm using my local host. You can use your local host, or you could use your AWS. It's actually better if you use your AWS. I just don't want to put all of my username and passwords on online here. And my user and my password. And we said before, the SQL command would look like this. So I'm going to create a little variable called SQL equals. Put that in quotes. Now, the thing is, we wouldn't actually want it to look exactly like this, because otherwise every album that we add would have the exact same name, year, and artist. Really what we want is, if that's the title that we passed in theory, what we want to do is we want to pass in the title. Now we don't do it in one step like this because someone could use this as an opportunity to make what's called a SQL injection attack. Whereas they could put in actual SQL code like drop table albums as the title of an album, and it could have some pretty disastrous results. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a placeholder in here called title. And we'll put a placeholder for year. And we'll put a placeholder for artist. And then down here, and step 3 is where we're going to actually bind this placeholder with this value using some pre-built code that will protect us against the SQL injection. And then we'll put in the length, which was 50. Okay, so the title, where I got that length, was right here, right? So title is up to 50 characters. Okay, and then we have the year. Oops. Now this one's a little different. It's not a string. It's an integer. Okay. And then the next thing we do is execute the command. And then it'll disconnect from the database, which means we just say the connection is equal to null. And then we'll redirect to another page. So in this case, the way we do it is we say header, and we're basically going to change the header to be something called albums.php, which means it'll load the albums.php page, which we haven't created yet. So it should just create a 404 error after saving this in the database. So let's give it a try. So if I hit refresh now, so now it goes and we go to the albums.php page. It's not here. If I go back, we should have a new record in our database though. So we're at 101. So I run select star, and now we have 102 in there. So we can see that it's saved. I'm going to stop this video here. In the next video, we're going to build a table to display the results. And then in subsequent videos, we'll look at doing drop-down menus, editing, deleting, and so forth.